right, so we're moving on to extrusive time here. So extrusive time is always going to have a long exposure, a long shutter speed. And I would say generally speaking, that would be 1/15th of a second or slower. So that's not 100% true. If you're at a NASCAR race and you're photographing the cars as they're going by, you might get extrusive time at 1/250th of a second. They're moving so fast that would change things a little bit. But just let's say in general, day-to-day life, like 1/15th, 1/30th of a second or slower are going to capture that. So when we have extrusive time, we're capturing the movement. So it's something that we can't see with our eyes because it's the accumulation of that time on the image sensor or on the piece of film. So there's a couple of ways you can approach that. And this first image that we have is by Jonah. I'm just going to look at the shutter speed for this. He's at 1/10th of a second, so a longer shutter speed. And he chose to pan. So when you're panning, you keep your camera on the same axis, the same line as your subject as they're moving, and you have to hold it very still as far as up and down goes. So you're moving it horizontally at the same speed as your subject. And it is tricky and it takes a lot of practice. And you can see that he's pretty successful here. The background shows movement, but the kid is relatively sharp. I think if he did this 20 more times or 100 more times, he probably already did it 20 times, he could work to have it even sharper. But this is pretty close here. This is pretty accurate. Moving with your subject, showing the passage of time in the subjects behind the person that you're photographing. We also see that here with Bree's image. She's at 1/15th of a second. Her subject doesn't seem like they're moving quite as fast. Here his feet are moving. He looks like he's moving really fast. Here it looks like more casual. Again, she's following the subject. And the face is fairly sharp here. So again, a pretty good job as far as capturing that extrusive time, but also keeping your subject nice and sharp. So that's one option. Move with your subject so the background gets blurred, but the subject stays sharp. Bree, as you're framing up your images, make sure that you're including all of the subjects so you're not cropping in, because there's room up here that's not really adding anything to the image, but having this would add more to the image. The other option for showing time, or one of the other options, is to be still and your subject moves by you. So here these cars are moving past. This is Eric's image. Eric, as he's standing on the side of the street, I think he said like a fire truck went by. So we see the movement. We see where the exposure started, and then we can follow that line to where the exposure finished, and that's 0.8 seconds. He could sit here and close down his aperture down to f/22 and have an even longer exposure, have more cars come by, and have more lines going across. So you'll see images like this that will last 5 minutes of people just allowing cars to come by. So this is another really fun approach to this. Nice exposure overall too. This is Christopher's image, and very similar to what we saw in the last image. He is still, the background is still, and the subject is moving. Now, if you compare the amount of movement here at 0.5 seconds to the amount of movement, and it's in the background here, or here, you can see there's a lot more movement happening at 0.5 seconds. And using the skateboarder as he's moving adds to that movement, right? So we're not just seeing the line, we're seeing him turning as he's skateboarding. So that adds this fun dimension of line to the image. So another good example of showing extrusive time by staying in place. So we're showing two options here, moving with your subject or staying in place. Now, here's another option completely. This is Julian's image. He's at 1/40th of a second. And like I said, sometimes 1/40th of a second will show movement if your subject's moving fast enough. So here he has his friend in the kitchen hula hooping, and because the hula hoop's whipping around so fast, you can see that movement at 1/40th of a second. So here he's standing still, the subject's moving, and we're getting this extrusive time. Now, someone hula hooping in the kitchen seems kind of funny, and it looks like it's really nice outside. So assuming that you're able to keep your social distance, whatever that setup is and where you're living, I would for sure move outside and allow this to happen outside. It's bright outside, so you might not be able to have this motion. So you might have to wait until it's later in the evening so you have less light, so you're able to have a longer exposure. So still think of the atmosphere and how that's adding to the whole storyline. You need less light opposed to taking it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but inside. Take it at 7 o'clock in the afternoon, but take it outside so we can still get more of that atmosphere.